The air was thick with anticipation as Barack Obama leaned slightly toward the microphone, his voice carrying the calm cadence that had defined his years in public life. He wasn't raising his tone, wasn't trying to dominate the room. He was simply laying out his point with the quiet precision of someone who knew the weight of words could be sharper than any shout. But just as the thought began to take shape, Charlie Kirk leaned forward in his chair, hand slicing through the air like he was swatting away a nuisance. His voice, dripping with smug bravado, cut across Obama's sentence. Excuse me. No, that's not true. You're dodging the real issue." A few in the audience gasped at the interruption. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Obama paused, his eyes steady, his jaw set, his posture unbroken. He didn't snap back. He didn't flinch. Instead, he let the silence hang for just long enough to make Kirk's arrogance echo through the room. Charlie smirked, certain he had seized the moment, certain the cameras were catching his boldness, his bravado. But then, Obama turned his gaze directly on him, calm, piercing, controlled. The kind of look that doesn't need volume to command the stage. And then, in a voice that carried more weight than 100 shouted insults, Obama spoke the line no one expected. A line that was not loud, not angry, but devastating in its clarity. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a reminder, a mirror, a strike at the very core of Kirk's argument. For a heartbeat, the room was frozen. No one moved, no one breathed. The smug smile faltered, just slightly, on Kirk's face. The cameras caught it all, the shift in power, the sudden recognition that interruption had backfired. And in that moment, as one attendee would later whisper, the room shifted. Because what Obama had said wasn't just confined to that stage. It wasn't just for Kirk or the people in the front row. It was for everyone watching, for everyone who had ever felt their voice silenced, their dignity interrupted. And what Obama said next would ripple far beyond the stage. This wasn't just a debate. It was a collision of two very different worlds, two symbols of America's present and its future, clashing on one stage. On one side sat Charlie Kirk, a self-proclaimed warrior of youth conservatism, the loud voice of a movement that thrives on provocation, soundbites, and culture war theatrics. To him, control of the moment meant control of the narrative. And in this clash, he was determined to dominate. But Obama was not just any opponent. His legacy was steeped in moments where composure triumphed over chaos, where calm rebuttals dismantled entire arguments. To see him interrupted so brazenly was more than a breach of debate etiquette. It was symbolic of something larger, the way arrogance seeks to drown out dignity. How noise often tries to bury truth. The room could feel the tension mounting. Some leaned forward, hungry for drama. Others looked uneasy, sensing the disrespect crackling in the air. It wasn't simply that Kirk was talking over Obama. It was that he was attempting to erase, to silence, to seize the microphone of the national conversation by force of interruption. And yet, Obama remained unshaken. His words were deliberate, carefully chosen, as if each sentence was meant to stand as a counterweight to Kirk's barrage of interruptions. Where Kirk threw sparks, Obama poured water. Where Kirk lunged, Obama stepped aside with poise, making the aggression look small, even desperate. Still, the stakes stretched beyond the stage. To the progressive viewers, this wasn't just a debate, it was validation of their own experiences. How many had been talked over, dismissed, interrupted in classrooms, workplaces, or public spaces? Obama's ability to hold his ground without raising his voice spoke to something deeper, the possibility that dignity could silence arrogance without ever needing to shout. But to Kirk's supporters, this was the moment to prove that youthful defiance could rattle the old guard. Every interruption was a declaration: we will not let you finish, we will not let you define the story. And so the clash became bigger than policy. It became about the very soul of discourse in America. Would reason hold the stage, or would interruption win the night? Each time Kirk cut in, the crowd stirred louder, half gasping, half egging him on. Each time Obama answered, his calm felt sharper, his patience more commanding. The tension was no longer about whether Kirk would interrupt again. It was about how far Obama's composure could stretch before something broke. Because while Obama had already delivered one unexpected line that shifted the room, the audience sensed that wasn't the end. No, the way Kirk kept pressing, smirking, interrupting, it was clear he was building toward something. A climax, a confrontation that either exposed Obama as outdated or exposed Kirk as outmatched. The audience leaned in, eyes flicking between the two men. How much further could this go? Who would falter first? But the truth was, the real fireworks hadn't even begun. To understand why this clash with Obama mattered, you have to understand Charlie Kirk himself. He didn't just stumble onto the stage, he built his brand brick by brick, headline by headline, interruption by interruption. Kirk rose to prominence as the founder of Turning Point USA, a youth-focused conservative organization that branded itself as the answer to what it claimed was left-wing domination of campuses. What started as a small outfit distributing pamphlets soon became a national platform, with complete viral videos, raucous conferences, and a loyal online following. From the beginning, Kirk carved out his identity through confrontation. His speeches weren't quiet lectures, they were performances designed for clips and retweets. He thrived on creating moments that went viral, mocking a professor in front of a class, sneering at a student's question, laughing off facts with a punchline crafted to humiliate rather than enlighten. To his supporters, this was proof of courage. To critics, it was smugness masquerading as debate. Time and again, the pattern repeated. He would belittle his opponents with a smirk, cutting them off before their sentences found air. He would dismiss research with a wave of the hand, mocking expertise as elitism. He built his reputation less on policy mastery than on swagger, the ability to make his adversary look foolish in the shortest number of seconds possible. In the age of TikTok and Twitter, that skill alone could launch a career. And for Charlie Kirk, it did. It wasn't uncommon to see him in viral clips calling out professors, branding them indoctrinators, with the self-assured tone of someone who believed age and credentials didn't matter. He leaned into this role of the rebel underdog, casting himself as the bold truth-teller in rooms full of so-called elites. But beneath the theatrics, one thing became clear. Arrogance wasn't just a tactic for Kirk, it was his foundation. He rarely entered a debate seeking dialogue. He sought dominance. He didn't treat exchanges as opportunities to explore, he treated them as battles to win. The smirk, the interruptions, the sharp tone, these weren't slip-ups, they were trademarks. They told audiences exactly who Charlie Kirk was. A man who measured victory not by persuasion, but by how thoroughly he could silence someone else. And that's what made this clash with Obama so different. Because if Kirk had made a career out of dismissing students and professors, out of belittling opponents who didn't carry the same weight, here he was facing something entirely new. Obama wasn't a college sophomore nervously asking a question. He wasn't a professor cornered at the end of class. He was a former president of the United States, a man whose words had moved millions, whose poise had steadied crises, whose legacy extended beyond applause lines and social media clips. But Kirk, wrapped in the confidence that had carried him this far, couldn't or wouldn't see the difference. To him, this was just another stage, another chance to show that interruption and swagger could win the moment. And so, he leaned on the same moves. The quick cut-in, the dismissive wave, the smirk that said he was in control. Yet arrogance carries a hidden weakness. It thrives when unchallenged, but falters when met with calm precision. Overconfidence blinds its owner to the possibility that the other side has not only seen this tactic before, but knows exactly how to dismantle it. And that's where Kirk miscalculated, because arrogance, no matter how loud, has one fatal flaw. It underestimates experience. Before the cameras, before the speeches that filled stadiums, before the presidency itself, Obama's story began in a far humbler place. Born in Honolulu to a Kenyan father and an American mother, his childhood was marked by questions of identity, belonging, and resilience. He grew up navigating cultures, communities, and expectations, learning early that the world often judged not by substance but by surface. It was in Chicago, as a young community organizer, that Obama began to shape his approach to politics, not through the boardrooms of power, but in church basements and crowded living rooms. He listened to people's frustrations, the pain of factory closures, the struggles of single parents, the frustration of workers who felt invisible. He wasn't speaking then to cameras or crowds. He was learning how to build trust, how to find common ground, how to use language not to dominate, but to uplift. That grounding mattered because the path ahead was anything but smooth. Obama faced doubts at every stage. When he first ran for office, skeptics dismissed him as inexperienced, untested. Opponents mocked his name, his background, his heritage. Racism trailed him in whispers and in headlines. There were always voices saying he wasn't ready, wasn't capable, wasn't enough. And yet, time and again, he answered not with anger, but with composure. He understood that dignity itself could be a weapon, that calm under pressure could cut deeper than outrage. His rise through politics, Illinois Senate, the 2004 Democratic National Convention speech, the 2008 campaign, was marked by that very balance. He could inspire with soaring rhetoric, yes, but he could also disarm an opponent with quick wit, with the kind of remark that made crowds laugh while his adversary sputtered. These were the early glimpses of what would become his reputation, the master of the mic drop moment, the calm teacher facing down the loudest student in the room. And that reputation followed him into the presidency. He endured a political climate that was often hostile, sometimes vicious. He was interrupted during speeches, disrespected in ways no president before him had been. Critics sought to rattle him with conspiracy theories, with personal insults, with constant attempts to delegitimize his very presence. Yet even then his composure rarely cracked. He wielded humor as a shield, intellect as a counterpunch. One well-timed pause, one devastating one-liner, could silence a room that had been roaring seconds before. These weren't accidental gifts. They were skills honed over years of being underestimated, years of having to prove himself against louder, angrier, more dismissive opponents. Obama had been forged in the fire of skepticism and sharpened by the need to rise above it. Where others lunged, he waited. Where others shouted, he spoke with the calm conviction that turned noise into background static. That's what made his presence across from Charlie Kirk so profound. Because in many ways, Kirk represented the kind of opponent Obama had seen countless times before. Brash, certain, quick to interrupt, unwilling to listen. But Obama had decades of practice in dealing with arrogance. He knew how to let the loudness expose itself, how to let overconfidence create its own cracks. To those watching, the contrast was striking. Kirk embodied youth, arrogance, overconfidence. Obama embodied experience, patience, dignity. It was the classic image of a student who thought he could outtalk the teacher, not realizing that the teacher had already heard every version of the same argument. And while Kirk leaned into interruption as his weapon of choice, Obama had built an entire career showing that silence itself could be more powerful than noise. A pause, a look, a calm remark delivered at the right moment. These tools had carried him from community meetings to the presidency. They had turned hecklers into footnotes and opponents into cautionary tales. This was why Obama's supporters admired him so deeply, not just for the policies he championed, but for the way he carried himself under fire. He showed that you didn't need to shout to be strong, that dignity could be louder than arrogance, that patience could be sharper than provocation. He embodied the possibility that leadership could be defined by restraint rather than rage. And so, when he sat across from Charlie Kirk, facing interruption after interruption, there was no panic in his eyes, no stumble in his words. There was only the steady composure of someone who had lived this moment 1,000 times before, each time turning the aggression of others into their own undoing. The crowd could sense it, that quiet power, that readiness. Kirk thought he was writing a new story, one where he embarrassed a former president with quick cuts and smug dismissals. What he didn't realize was that Obama had spent his entire life preparing for precisely this kind of moment. So when Kirk tried to embarrass him on stage, Obama was more than ready. The debate opened with measured tones. Obama spoke with that familiar cadence, calm, deliberate, unhurried. He laid out his points on civic responsibility and the importance of young people shaping the future with empathy, not cynicism. But barely a minute into his remarks, Charlie Kirk struck. "Yeah, but you're ignoring the facts," Kirk interjected, his hand slicing the air, his voice tight with practiced arrogance. That was interruption number 1. Obama didn't flinch. He simply leaned back, offering the faintest smile, as if a teacher was humoring an overeager student. He let Kirk talk over him, let the words rattle out unchecked. Then, with an easy tone, he picked up exactly where he left off. The audience murmured, some sighs, some shifting in seats. They knew this pattern. Kirk had built a brand on it. Interruption number 2 came moments later. "But that's not true," Kirk snapped, his voice just sharp enough to carry over Obama's. The crowd chuckled, not at the point made, but at the sheer audacity. Obama paused, giving Kirk just enough rope. He tilted his head slightly, raised his eyebrows, and then continued with measured precision. His silence, his patience, made Kirk look less like a challenger and more like a heckler at the back of the room. By the third interruption, laughter started to ripple through the audience. Kirk leaned forward in his chair, trying to dominate the space, but Obama remained unshaken. His eyes tracked Kirk with the calm amusement of someone who had seen this tactic before, someone who knew that overconfidence eventually collapses under its own weight. Number 4 hit harder. Kirk tried to frame Obama as dodging the question. He raised his voice, jabbed a finger, cut off the former president mid-sentence. But this time, the audience reacted differently. There were sighs, even a few groans. A woman near the front shook her head. The tide was shifting, not in Kirk's favor. Interruption 5 came quickly after, as if he felt his grip slipping. He rolled out a rehearsed line, smug grin plastered across his face, clearly waiting for applause that never came. Instead, laughter bubbled up, this time at him, not with him. Obama leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His body language sharpened the tension. He hadn't said a word yet, but the silence carried more weight than anything Kirk had offered. By the 6th interruption, the atmosphere had changed completely. The audience was no longer entertained. They were annoyed. Every time Kirk cut in, he exposed himself as insecure, desperate to prove dominance where none existed. A student in the back actually laughed out loud, unable to hide the absurdity of it. And still, Obama sat there, composed, calm, a slight smile tugging at his lips. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to fight for space. He knew what was coming, and so did the crowd. The tension was almost cinematic. Obama leaned in slightly, narrowing the gap between himself and the microphone. The audience stilled, waiting. Even Kirk, perhaps sensing the shift, looked uncertain for the first time. And then, interruption number 7. Kirk jumped in again, voice higher, more insistent, trying one last time to reclaim control of the moment. But he didn't realize what he had just done, because it was in that exact beat, right after the 7th interruption, that Obama finally spoke, delivering the comeback that silenced the room. The 7th interruption came like all the others, loud, clumsy, desperate to seize control. Charlie Kirk's voice cut across Obama's mid-thought, sharp and insistent, a last-ditch attempt to rattle the man who had weathered presidents, dictators, and crises. But this time, the room was no longer on his side. A low groan rolled through the audience. One student muttered, "Here we go again." Even the moderator shifted in his chair, exasperated. Obama sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Kirk, and then silence. A silence so deliberate, so heavy, it pulled every pair of eyes in the room toward him. Obama leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced, and simply looked at Kirk, as if he was deciding whether to waste another breath. The pause stretched. Kirk blinked, uncertain. The silence itself was the first strike. Then, with a calm voice that sliced through the tension, Obama spoke. "Charlie, it's interesting. You've spent the last 10 minutes interrupting me because you think volume equals victory. But let me tell you something. When I was your age, I listened first, spoke second, and tried to learn. That's how I ended up here. And if you're more interested in scoring points than seeking truth, well, maybe that explains why you keep losing people the moment you open your mouth." The room erupted. Gasps, laughter, applause, an explosion of sound, the release of pent-up energy after watching Kirk barrel through interruption after interruption. Students clapped, some even stood, unable to contain themselves. A ripple of applause spread like wildfire, while Kirk's smile froze, brittle, betraying cracks beneath the surface. Obama wasn't done. He let the applause crest, then raised a hand, lowering the room back into silence. That gesture alone, simple, commanding, spoke volumes. "Here's the thing," he continued, measured, deliberate. "You think politics is a game of gotchas, that if you talk fast enough, loud enough, maybe you can drown out the other side. But the truth has a funny way of waiting, and no matter how many times you cut me off, you can't interrupt reality." The words hung in the air like a gavel strike. The crowd roared again, but this time it wasn't laughter. It was approval, validation. Phones went up, recording, capturing the moment they knew would flood TikTok, Twitter, YouTube within hours. Kirk shifted in his seat. He tried to laugh, tried to play it off, but the confidence was slipping. His hand fidgeted with his notes. His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, but the timing was gone. The audience wasn't with him anymore. They were waiting for Obama. Obama's cadence slowed. He let each phrase breathe. Each pause sharpened the blade. When you spend your time tearing people down, when you confuse arrogance for strength, you end up smaller than you started. That's the thing about bluster. It looks big until someone puts it next to substance, and then the air leaks out. Another wave of laughter. This one hurt Kirk. He flushed, lips pressed tight, eyes darting. The smugness, the practiced swagger was evaporating under the weight of Obama's composure. Obama glanced toward the moderator, then back to Kirk. "I've sat across from people who disagreed with me on just about everything. Republicans, world leaders, even dictators. You know what they all had in common? They let me finish my sentence. Because deep down, even the toughest of them understood that respect isn't weakness. It's the starting point of strength." The audience broke into applause again, this time longer, heavier. The sound filled the hall, rolling like thunder. Obama leaned back in his chair, relaxed, as if the entire exchange had only confirmed what he already knew, that dignity always outlasts noise. Kirk tried to salvage the moment. He leaned forward, stammering, Well, with all due respect, Mr. President, you're dodging the question. You still haven't answered." But the audience wasn't buying it. His voice was drowned out by murmurs, eye rolls, even laughter. Someone near the front whispered, "Sit down." Obama let him sputter for a moment, then cut in, not with volume, but with precision. "You know, Charlie, the problem isn't that I haven't answered. The problem is you're too busy talking to hear it." The line landed like a punch. Sharp, devastating, undeniable. The crowd exploded once more, laughter and applause mingling in a chorus of approval. The tension snapped, replaced by something electric, almost gleeful. Phones recorded, students shouted. Even the moderator cracked a smile. And Kirk sat there, caught in the blast of his own undoing. His shoulders hunched slightly, his smirk faltered, his face betrayed the one thing he fought hardest to hide: insecurity. Obama, meanwhile, remained the picture of composure, calm, patient, almost amused. He didn't need to shout, he didn't need to gloat. The room was already with him. He leaned back again, voice softer now, but cutting even deeper. "You know, Charlie, the problem isn't that I haven't answered. It's that you're too busy talking to hear it." The audience broke into applause again, this time longer, heavier. The applause filled the hall, rolling like thunder. Obama leaned back in his chair, relaxed, as if the entire exchange had only confirmed what he already knew, that dignity always outlasts noise. Kirk tried to salvage the moment. He leaned forward, stammering, Well, with all due respect, Mr. President, you're dodging the question. You still haven't answered." But the audience wasn't buying it. His voice was drowned out by murmurs, eye rolls, even laughter. Someone near the front whispered, "Sit down." Obama let him sputter for a moment, then cut in, not with volume, but with precision. "You know, Charlie, the problem isn't that I haven't answered. It's that you're too busy talking to hear it." The line landed like a punch. Sharp, devastating, undeniable. The crowd exploded once more, laughter and applause mingling in a chorus of approval. The tension snapped, replaced by something electric, almost gleeful. Phones recorded, students shouted. Even the moderator cracked a smile. And Kirk sat there, caught in the blast of his own undoing. His shoulders hunched slightly, his smirk faltered, his face betrayed the one thing he fought hardest to hide: insecurity. Obama, meanwhile, remained the picture of composure, calm, patient, almost amused. He didn't need to shout, he didn't need to gloat, the room was already with him. He leaned back again, voice softer now, but cutting even deeper. Respect isn't something you demand by being the loudest voice in the room. Respect is earned by listening, earned by showing grace, earned by carrying yourself with a little humility. And the sooner you learn that, the sooner you might actually convince someone who doesn't already agree with you. The applause this time wasn't just loud, it was sustained, almost defiant. A standing ovation rose from the back rows, swelling toward the stage. The message was clear. The moment belonged to Obama. Kirk glanced around, trying to mask his unease, but the unraveling was complete. His hands fidgeted, his shoulders shifted, his gaze darted nervously. Every attempt to recover only underscored the damage. Obama let the energy ride out. He didn't pile on. He didn't need to. The mic drop had already happened. The silence, the precision, the truth, that was enough. And then, with a faint smile, he leaned into the mic one last time. But, now, if you'll allow me to finish, the crowd roared. Some clapped, some laughed, some even shouted in approval. The release was total. Obama had reclaimed the space with dignity and turned Kirk's interruptions into a self-inflicted spectacle. And in that moment, the room shifted. Everyone could feel it. The balance of power, the energy, the story that would leave this hall and travel across the country. But what no one realized in that moment was that the impact had only just begun. By the time Obama leaned back in his chair and the applause finally quieted, the cameras in the audience had already ensured the moment would not stay in that room. Within minutes, the clips were online, racing across platforms with the speed of wildfire. A single sentence had left Kirk exposed, and the internet was hungry for replay after replay. Memes rolled in by the hour. One showed Kirk as a balloon slowly deflating with each interruption, popping completely when Obama delivered his devastating line. Another overlaid the exchange with the Mortal Kombat announcer's voice, yelling, "Finish him!" On Instagram Reels, young voters stitched together Obama's words with scenes from boxing matches, turning the debate moment into a full cinematic knockout. Late-night comedians couldn't resist. The very next evening, monologues opened with clips of Kirk's failed interruptions. One joked, "Charlie Kirk tried to interrupt Obama 7 times. At this rate, he's one interruption away from a loyalty punch card." Another quipped, "It's like watching a kid play chess against a grand master, except the kid keeps knocking the pieces off the board." The punchlines landed not just because they were funny, but because everyone had already seen the clips, shared them, and lived through the catharsis of Obama's comeback. Even Obama's critics, usually quick to dismiss him, found themselves cornered. A conservative commentator on cable news reluctantly admitted, "Look, I don't agree with Obama on much, but you have to hand it to him. He handled Kirk with a level of composure we don't see often." The grudging acknowledgement only amplified the sense that something significant had happened. This wasn't just partisan spin, this was a moment so clean, so undeniable, that even detractors had to nod at the precision of it. For Obama's supporters, the validation was electric. Comment sections filled with messages like, "This is why Obama will always be my president," or "That's the kind of grace I wish we saw more in politics," or "As a young black woman, watching him carry himself like that makes me proud." People weren't just entertained, they were inspired. They saw in Obama's composure a reminder that arrogance doesn't win in the long run. They felt affirmed that truth, delivered with dignity, could still cut through the noise. TikTok creators leaned into the emotional resonance, posting videos with captions like, "When they try to silence you, but you stay calm and let the truth speak louder," overlaying the clip with inspirational music. Others framed it as a life lesson. Stay calm, stay sharp, let arrogance destroy itself. What had started as a clash in a debate hall was quickly being repackaged as motivational content, spreading well beyond politics. The reach was staggering. By the end of the week, the clip had racked up tens of millions of views across platforms. Hashtags trended not just in the United States, but internationally. News outlets from London to Nairobi ran headlines about Obama's takedown, framing it as a reminder of his enduring presence on the global stage. And while Kirk's supporters scrambled to spin the narrative, the damage was already done. Every time they tried to defend him, the meme culture drowned them out. For every post claiming Obama had been unfair, there were 10 more videos with slow-motion replays of Kirk's face as the room erupted in laughter. The imbalance was total. The most telling shift wasn't just online, it was in the way people talked about the moment in everyday conversations. In classrooms, at dinner tables, on commutes, people repeated the line, sometimes word for word. It became shorthand for a larger frustration with arrogance, a way of saying, dignity wins. By now, the story wasn't about a debate stage at all. It had transformed into something larger, a touchstone of cultural memory. Just as certain lines in history, like "Yes, we can" or "I have a dream," linger far beyond their moment, Obama's calm dismantling of Kirk carried weight far greater than one night's entertainment. This wasn't just a clip, it was a symbol, a reminder, a rallying cry. And that's why, as the hashtag swirled, as the memes multiplied, as both fans and critics replayed the exchange on loop, one truth became impossible to deny. This wasn't just a debate moment. It became a cultural flashpoint. When the applause faded and the headlines settled into their rhythm, the heart of the moment revealed itself. Obama hadn't just outmaneuvered Charlie Kirk in a war of words. He had modeled something deeper, something millions of viewers recognized in themselves, the daily battle between arrogance and dignity, noise and truth, interruption and patience. The interruptions Kirk hurled that night weren't just rhetorical jabs. They symbolized something familiar to anyone who's ever been silenced at work, dismissed in school, or talked over at the dinner table. They were the embodiment of a culture that often rewards volume over wisdom, swagger over substance. And Obama's response wasn't just a clapback, it was a philosophy played out in real time. Because when arrogance shouts, dignity doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't flinch, it doesn't scramble, it doesn't match the noise with more noise. Dignity waits, it listens, and then, when the moment is right, it delivers a truth so sharp, so undeniable, that no amount of bluster can cover it. That was the lesson embedded in Obama's calm presence. His line wasn't simply a mic drop. It was a reminder that silence, patience, and composure can be the most devastating counterattacks in a world addicted to speed and noise. It was a call to all those who feel pressure to shout louder just to be heard. You don't need to out-yell arrogance. You need to outlast it. The moral stretched beyond politics. In classrooms where students replayed the clip, teachers used it as a lesson in respectful discourse. In workplaces, people shared it as a reminder that leadership isn't about dominating the room, but commanding it with presence. On social media, young activists quoted it as proof that resilience is power. For immigrants, for marginalized voices, for anyone who has carried the weight of being underestimated, the moment hit with particular resonance. Obama's journey, his rise through doubt and barriers, echoed through that stage presence. His calm wasn't weakness. It was earned strength, sharpened by years of being told he didn't belong, only to prove again and again that he did. His response wasn't just to Kirk, but to the culture of dismissal that Kirk represented. And so the debate moment transformed into a universal truth. Arrogance may take up space, but it never holds it. Noise may dominate for a moment, but it cannot endure. Truth delivered with calm precision outlives every interruption. That's why the line lingered, not because it was flashy, but because it was timeless. It was the kind of truth that outgrows the stage where it was spoken, that people carry with them into their own battles. Whether it's standing firm in a meeting, speaking up in class, or defending one's dignity in the face of mockery, Obama's example whispered, "Hold your ground. You don't have to match their arrogance. You only have to trust your truth." In the end, what millions witnessed wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a parable in real time. A lesson about what happens when experience meets arrogance, when patience meets swagger, when truth meets noise. And it left viewers with a choice, not just to admire Obama's composure, but to adopt it. Because the message was never really about Kirk at all. It was about all of us, about what happens when we're interrupted, dismissed, silenced, about how we respond in those moments that test our character. Obama showed that the greatest strength lies not in the loudest voice, but in the most steadfast one. And his words, echoing long after the debate ended, carried a charge meant for every viewer who has ever been underestimated. Stand tall. Don't be silenced. When arrogance shouts, let your dignity speak louder, even if your voice is quiet. The crowd had heard it, the world had seen it, but for millions watching at home, the real victory wasn't Obama's alone. It was a reminder that dignity belongs to anyone who chooses it. And so, as the curtain closed on that night, the lesson remained, etched not just in headlines, but in hearts. When arrogance tries to own the stage, dignity doesn't compete, it conquers. The debate may have ended, but the resonance had only just begun. 6 interruptions, 6 moments where Charlie Kirk tried to rattle, dismiss, and dominate. And yet it only took one line, just one line from Barack Obama to silence the noise and remind everyone in that room and millions beyond it what true strength looks like. This wasn't just a clash between two debaters. It was the perfect portrait of hero versus villain. On one side, arrogance, loud, smug, desperate to control the stage. On the other, calm dignity, measured, unshaken, carrying the weight of experience and the clarity of truth. And in the end, dignity won. It always does. But this story doesn't live on a stage alone. It belongs to everyone watching, everyone who's ever been interrupted, underestimated, or spoken over. Obama's moment is proof that arrogance may roar, but truth lasts longer. His calm wasn't just a tactic, it was a lesson, one we can carry into our own lives, our own fights, our own moments of being tested. And that's why we tell these stories, to remind each other that strength doesn't come from volume, but from conviction. That you don't need to outshout arrogance, you only need to outlast it. So if this moment spoke to you, if it gave you pride or clarity, or even just a little fire to carry into your own battles, don't let it end here. Be part of the movement. Subscribe, share this video, and spread the reminder that dignity is power. Because the fight for dignity doesn't end on one stage. It doesn't end in one debate. It begins with all of us.